All right, let's get started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Sarah Higgins. I'm the Member Education and Events Director with the New York State Restaurant Association. And we are here today with Paul Rooney. He is an attorney with Ellenoff Grossman and Schole. And Paul is here in all of his expertise to talk with you about how to handle potential ICE raids in your workplace and how to, get in check, be on point with I-9 compliance. Just a couple of reminders before I turn it over to Paul. The webinar is being recorded, and as a NYSER member, you have the ability to go back and watch it at your convenience in our webinar archive. And then the other item is Paul will take questions, but let's let him get through all the material and we'll do questions at the end. So if you do have a question, you can enter into the Q&A box and we will do our best to get to them all at the end of the presentation. Paul, thank you so much for being able to do this. We were just talking, everyone, about how things are changing very quickly with this topic. So we really appreciate Paul's commitment to joining us today as these things are changing in real time. So Paul, I will give you the floor.
Good morning, everyone. I wish I was speaking to you under different circumstances. As Sarah explained, as you've read in the paper, there are fast-moving changes related to immigration law. And I'm here to talk to you about something that to date has been relatively rare, but could become much more common over the next 4 years. And that is ICE coming to visit you, to inspect your Form I-9s, and to possibly search for undocumented workers in your workplace. The purpose of this talk is not to sow panic about these subjects. Actually, it's quite the opposite. The point of this is to remind you of your rights and ensure that if this should come to pass, you will know what to do. And once you know what you'll do, you won't have to worry about it as much because you'll be prepared. And I would liken this to the fact that, I've been working in various workplaces for almost 40 years, and I've never been in a fire. But every workplace that I've ever worked in has fire drills, actually usually more than one every year. And as a result of those, we're less worried about fire. So that's the purpose of this, is to make you feel confident and unafraid, not to scare you about this subject. So the reason we're having to talk about this is that there's been a deportation program promised by the new administration on a scale that this country has never seen. If you see this chart here, you'll see different groups of people that are at risk of being deported. The most common estimate of the number of undocumented people living in the United States is 11 million, but there are estimates that are higher than that. 90% of those people are estimated to be of working age. So that means if the deportation effort that's being promised is actually carried out, it's going to have a significant impact on the availability of labor in the United States. In addition to that, there are 2.3 million people who entered the United States over a 15-month period between January 1st, 2003 and April 2004. And many of them are also subject to removal. Then we have other groups, temporary protected status and humanitarian parole. These are people who have been allowed into the United States. They're lawfully here. They have work permits, and many of them are of working age. And you may recall the discussion of the Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio during the election. Those people were here under temporary protected status. Now, the issue with this is that temporary protected status and humanitarian parole can be revoked. Just yesterday, it was announced that the temporary protected status of Venezuelans who are here is going to be revoked. There are 500,000 people who have that status. So if you're looking at these numbers and thinking to yourself, well, I don't employ anyone who's undocumented, so this is irrelevant to me, that may not be true. You may have workers who have temporary protected status and they could suddenly become undocumented and unable to work in the United States or be here on humanitarian parole. So the total impact is close to 15 million individuals. And if it's carried through over the next 4 years, it's going to have a big impact. This chart shows the industries that have the highest percentages of undocumented workers. And these are estimates. You can see agriculture is the highest. In my view, that's an underestimate. I've seen farmers on TV saying that half their workforce is undocumented. Certainly, it's been a focus of some enforcement. But the point of that is you should be aware that if there's a big effort to deport agricultural workers, that could affect the price and availability of your meat, your dairy, and your vegetables. The other one, almost as close, is construction. So if you're planning on a renovation or you're building a restaurant or a series of restaurants, that could impact you as well. If the subcontractors who are supposed to build your building have their workers deported or detained, that could lead to delays or other problems. And then it may not surprise you, leisure and hospitality and personal other services also have significant numbers. So that's the broader picture of what's happening and why it's necessary for us to even discuss this subject. So I-9s, I think you probably all know what an I-9 form is. It's the form you filled out on your first day. You presented evidence that you could work lawfully in the United States. So periodically over the past years and probably in the near future, ICE has sort of done a surge of I-9 inspections where they do send out thousands and thousands of notices in a short period of time. So even if you haven't been inspected in a while, it's more likely that you'll get a notice than it has been in the past. So if you get a notice of inspection, it will say that you have 3 business days to respond to it. There's no surprise inspections of your I-9. So if somebody shows up and says, I want to see your I-9s right now, you can tell them no, that that this isn't some kind of grace ICE is giving to you. This is right in the Immigration and Naturalization Act that you get 3 days to comply. You have the right to talk to an attorney about it. You can have an attorney present in the inspection if you want. Most commonly, people don't do that. They usually just provide the forms either at their business or at an accountant's office or their lawyer's office or somewhere that's neutral, so you don't have to let the people inspecting them into your workplace. And to date, it's, if you ask for an extension, it was usually commonly granted if it was reasonable. Whether that'll be the tenor of how this is done under the new administration kind of remains to be seen. To prepare for the possibility that you'll be inspected, you should check over your forms and first of all, just make sure you have one for every employee and that they're completed, that they're signed, that the right documents were provided. There's a process where you can internally audit your forms, and ICE has a detailed guide on the internet on how to do it. You can have an attorney do it. An accountant that's experienced can also do it, but it also may be a good idea. And the point of all of this is that a notice of inspection may be a prelude to a visit by ICE agents because they want to see if there's some inkling that you might not have documented properly all the workers who are working there. So it pays to have everything in order and ideally get a clean bill of health if ICE were to inspect your forms. And also, this is just a practical tip, make sure that they're accessible. Like, don't keep them in the farmost corner of your crawl space uh, because you might need them on relatively short notice. And the last thing you would want to tell them is you don't know where they are, you can't find them. So when there's an actual inspection that goes on, you don't have to answer any questions. You don't have to be interviewed effectively about the I-9s. You could just send a low-level employee to sit with the agents as they review them, if you like, someone who doesn't really know anything about them, and just have them sit there quietly. But it's not a chance for them to interview you or ask you or quiz you about your I-9s and this and that. They're just there to look at the paperwork and to make sure that it's in order. After the inspection, you should get a follow-up letter from ICE that essentially it could be anything from a clean bill of health, which we refer to as a compliance letter, or notices that are various problems uh, with your forms, all the way up to if they're so out of order, or there's so many missing uh, that you could get a notice of intent to fine. If you get anything other than a completely clean bill of health, you should call an attorney and have them address it and not do that on your own. So now to get to the sort of issue of the day, the fact that ICE agents can come to your business, even if all of your employees are citizens, uh, they can come to your business and uh, try to inspect it and try to uh, see if you're employing undocumented people. So, what can you do to prepare for this? Uh, in the restaurant, unlike many other businesses, you have a dining room that is a public area in the sense that you have an open door and any member of the public can come in for the purposes of ordering a meal and or getting a drink. And you have separate areas that are private, your office, the kitchen, your storage rooms, your break room. And you want to make it clear, if you haven't already, what's a private area of your business and what a semi-public area is. So if you don't have signs, you should put up signs that say no trespassing or private or employees only. Here's an example from the movie Shrek that you could try to use. You don't have to be rude about it. Probably these other phrases will do. But you want to make it clear as day that there are certain areas that only people with authorization are allowed to go into. And then there's the public, semi-public area where someone can walk in off the street and order a meal. You should, without inducing panic, try to educate your employees about what to do. The number one thing is to not run for the exits. If they run for the exits, that could be probable cause to arrest them. So that's the last thing they should do, is to run for the exits or to try to leave the building. You should tell them that they have the right to remain silent and to ask for an attorney, and that they do not have to give any identification or papers to ICE. Now, you're getting some help in this regard because the larger cities, including New York, are putting out a lot of educational materials so that citizens just know their rights in general when they're encountering ICE in any situation. And you might help facilitate that by distributing those materials, which have been vetted and prepared by the City of New York, to your employees if they haven't gotten them already. There are community groups out there. Last night on the news, they showed a group in Elizabeth that educates members of the community about their rights dealing with ICE, and they even sort of act out the situations that they could encounter if ICE knocks on their door and in various situations. So you're getting some help in that regard, but you might want to also contribute to that effort to make sure your employees know what to do. Also, if you have a collective bargaining agreement, you may find buried in there provisions that deal with immigration matters. We have found that in a number of collective bargaining agreements in recent days, and notably, the main agreement for the hotel union in New York has very, very detailed rules about what to do with immigration matters. So you may have something like that, and if you don't, your union may want to negotiate over that. So if ICE agents show up at your business, the very first piece of advice that we have is this: do not let them in. Don't let them in voluntarily. Do not volunteer for them to come in and look at whatever they want into the private areas of your restaurant. Why not? Why not? There's some of you watching this saying, if I just reasonably cooperate with these people and let them in and do their thing, they'll leave and they'll leave me alone. So, number one, they didn't come there to leave empty-handed. So if you let them in, they're going to look for something. And once you consent to letting them in, you can't object to what they're searching for. You have no legal recourse, and anything they see in plain sight, could be used as evidence. So the classic example, I'm not saying this would happen in a restaurant, is someone, answers the door in the middle of the night. They don't have their shirt on. The police, they say, you know what, I'm going to get a shirt on. They let the police in, and then on the way in, they see their drug paraphernalia, and now they're under arrest. So there's nothing to be gained by letting them in to your restaurant voluntarily. Don't do it. In addition, let's suppose you do let them in and they detain some of your workers. That could create some legal risk for you in this way. Say they detain someone who is the head of the union, or is trying to organize a union, or made a complaint to you about wages some months back. Now you're vulnerable to the allegation that you kind of let them in, invited them in, because you wanted to retaliate against certain workers, particularly if you thought that they were undocumented. So that's the very first piece of advice: is do not voluntarily let them in to your workplace. Now, we have gotten a taste of what the ICE tactics may be and what you may encounter in an incident you probably read about on last Thursday, when a seafood market and retail, commercial and retail seafood market called Ocean Seafood Depot in Newark was raided by the ICE agents. And the owner did not know his rights. They did not have a warrant, and they came in and just did whatever they wanted. The way it was described in the paper was by his lawyer was ICE came walking in like it was their empire's own conquered land. They were scrambling up delivery ramps. They blocked the exits. They banged on the bathroom doors to see if there were people in there. And They had no right to do any of that. They did not have a warrant. And it's an example of what I think we can expect, that they do not want to go to the trouble to getting a proper warrant. They don't particularly care that they're breaking the law. And they're going to dare people to assert their rights and to try to stop them. So this poor guy said they didn't have a court order, or I didn't even ask. He didn't even ask. Now, he said a court order. What he really means is a warrant. He didn't even think to ask if they had a warrant. Well, that's not going to happen to any member of this association, because you're going to know your rights when they show up. And we're not having it. We're not having any ICE agents walk into your restaurant and act like it's their conquered land. So these are the instructions. This is what to do in one of three situations. The first one is if they don't have a warrant. So you're going to ask. They come marching into your restaurant. They go up to the reservation desk. They're not there to eat or drink. They say they want to look around. You say, do you have a warrant? If the answer is no, you politely, and in all these situations, you're going to play it cool. You're going to use a moderate voice. You're not going to curse. You're just going to politely tell them that if they don't have a warrant and they're not there to have anything to eat or drink, that they need to leave. If they won't leave, tell them you're calling your lawyer and you're suing for trespassing in your restaurant and for violating your rights under the Fourth Amendment. And you're calling the police. Now, candidly, to all of you, we have researched and we have tried to find a situation where there was some kind of confrontation between ICE and the police. And we haven't found any. They must be very uncommon, because these raids were very uncommon, have been very uncommon. But that's not your problem. As far as you're concerned, a bunch of federal agents standing in your restaurant without a warrant are trespassers, and the police should remove them. You should try to record what you're doing, preferably with video. You probably have cameras in your restaurant, but if you can get audio as well, all the better, particularly recording you saying you have to leave, you're not welcome here. And the officers, they didn't become officers because they're not assertive. So they may bluster. They may say, you're obstructing justice. You're getting in our way. We're going to arrest you. You're breaking the law. It's not true. They're the ones breaking the law. So you have to stand your ground, as difficult as that may be, as politely as you can. Additionally, we've gotten some questions about, well, it's a dining room or it's a hotel lobby. It's a public area. Why can't they stay there? The answer is it's not a public area. It's not a public park. It's not a sidewalk. It's not Rockefeller Plaza. You are allowing people to walk through your door for the purpose of eating and drinking there, not to do whatever the heck they want. So just as you wouldn't, if I came into your restaurant and I started sitting down playing the violin, you would say, get out. It's not here. You're not here to do that. That's not the purpose of this area. And if push comes to shove, unfortunately, you may be in a situation where you'd have to say, well, if you're not going to leave, you're claiming you're going to be here, then I'm closing. So now you have to leave because no one's going to be here. And the police will be here and my lawyer will be here any minute if it goes on even that long. They are that determined to break the law. And then finally, and this goes for everything, do not physically obstruct what they are doing, ever. If they're breaking the law, you have lawyers to deal with it later. So that's if they don't have a warrant.
Hey,
If they
Paul,
say they have a
do you mind
warrant,
if
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, do you mind if I interrupt you? Would you mind
Sure.
going back to the last slide? I'm just, and you might get to this in a little bit, which is why we usually go through all the material. But I just want to ask what your recommendation would be. How do you empower your staff, right? Because a lot of times it's not going to be the owner, it's not going to be the manager at the front desk. It's going, in a lot of situations, especially with a mom and pop restaurant, it could be a teenager, it could be, somebody who's a little bit younger who doesn't have that kind of confidence or feel comfortable in that role, especially with a person of such authority. So what are your tips for that? Or you can say we'll get to those in a little bit.
So, no, this is a good time to talk about that. Is what we have advised is that any manager who's apt to be the first managerial, well, first of all, let's start with the lower level employees. Like, tell the lower level employees, like, if you see ICE agents outside or they come into the building, they come into your restaurant, whatever business it is, tell a manager. Like, don't try to engage ICE yourself. Don't invite them in. Um, and if they try to talk to you, just say, I can't let you in. You have to talk to my boss. And then get the boss, get the manager. And then what we've urged is that the managers be told what I'm telling you now, what I'm going to tell you over the next few minutes, what to do in that moment. Because it's really, it's like the first 3 minutes of the situation are going to largely decide what goes on. And so any manager who's likely to be a person that encounters these agents should know the gist of what to do. That's our advice. Um, so if they have a warrant, you're going to learn there's two kinds. There's an administrative warrant and a judicial warrant. You should ask them what kind they have and to see it. And if you can scan or photograph it and send it to your attorney, try to do that. But we also want you to know or be able to recognize quickly the difference between an administrative warrant and a judicial warrant. So if they have an administrative warrant, it will look something like this. And an administrative warrant, like a normal search warrant, it has to be signed by a judge. Okay. This is something different. You see how it says U.S. Department of Homeland Security at the top? And it says warrant. So that means it was issued by, not by a judge, but by Homeland Security. It also might be issued by ICE itself, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And you'll notice it says warrant for arrest of alien. And then the rest of the entire warrant, it's only one page, says in so many words, it's telling an immigration officer that any immigration officer that has a hold of this warrant that there's probable cause to believe that so and so is in the country illegally. And if you find them, you can arrest them and take them into detention. And then, ICE or immigration judges will handle it from there. Okay. Notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say you're allowed to enter into a property. It doesn't say you're allowed to take any evidence. It doesn't say you're allowed to do anything other than arrest this particular person if you can find them. Okay. So, a tactic they may use, apart from just showing up without a warrant like they did at Ocean Depot Seafood, is to show up with this administrative warrant because they suspect you have a worker there who is undocumented and wave it in your face and say, I have a warrant, let me in. Well, it doesn't say they're allowed in. And you don't have to let them in if they have an administrative warrant. And you don't have to do anything else either. If they ask you, is Paul Rooney, does he work here? None of your business. Can you point Paul Rooney out? I don't think so. I'm running a business here. I'm not here to help you capture whoever you're looking for. And so if you're not here to patronize my restaurant, you have to leave. It's the same deal as if they don't have a warrant at all. If they have an administrative warrant, you are free to tell them that you're not talking to them, they're not welcome to stay there, and that they can leave. And it's the same drill as if they have no warrant. They won't leave. You're calling your lawyer, you're calling the police, or closing up if they refuse. So now we're going to get to the judicial warrant. Now, a judicial warrant can only be issued and consistent with the Fourth Amendment. And the Fourth Amendment kind of gets short shrift. Everybody knows the First and Second Amendment. Most people can't really recite the Fourth Amendment, but it says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. And importantly here, no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. I don't know why I trailed off there. So they cannot get a warrant that entitles them to barge into the back rooms of your restaurant and look for people and arrest them unless they go down to the courthouse and they get a hold of a judge or a magistrate and they present evidence that there's probable cause that they're going to find evidence of a crime or evidence of an immigration violation in your restaurant. And guess what? It's not easy to get these things. In fact, that's exactly what they wrote in the New York Times today about how they cannot, there are some jails, including in New York, that will not hold people beyond their sentence date to allow ICE to pick them up without a judicial warrant. And ICE is frustrated about that because they're, quote, very difficult to get, unquote. So the broader picture here is that ICE can only come barging in the way they did to Ocean Seafood Depot if they have a judicial warrant. And a judicial warrant, and I think this is a technical legal term, is a pain in the ass to get. So they don't want to be bothered with following the law and going to all this trouble. Instead, they want to barge into your restaurant and have you not know what your rights are and just let them do whatever they want, because that's a lot easier for them. But we're not having it. You're not going to allow that in your restaurant. So a judicial warrant looks something like this. Importantly, it says United States District Court at the top. So it was issued by a court, and it'll say search and seizure warrant. So this is the real thing. They're allowed to come in and look for, within consistent with the warrant, the people and the items that are listed. So importantly, they can't just do whatever they want. It's only the people and items that are in the warrant. There are other requirements that you should make sure are fulfilled. Notably, make sure it's issued for your business and it's the correct address. It happens all the time at residences. Warrants are served at the wrong residence every day in this country. So don't take for granted that they're in the right place, that they have the right guys and the right address. And then also, they can't just serve it whenever they want. Warrants have an expiration date. And so if they have a lot that build up, they might try to bluff their way in. They might try to convince you that they're free to come in when they're not. But if they come in, you do have to comply with the warrant. And that means that you have to open up doors in offices and storage areas. If they are, the warrant is for electronic devices, you have to give over the devices, and you just generally have to comply with it. But a few tips about what you would do if they actually came in and had the right warrant. First of all, you and your employees don't have to speak to them about anything. If you do speak, don't lie to them, because that is a minor crime, lying to federal agents. Do not try to hide employees or documents. A lot of people ask, well, can I videotape or audio tape what they're doing? Absolutely. Do I have to shut off my camera system while they're there? No, you don't. And you can follow them around at a safe distance, not interfering with what they're doing, uh, to make sure they're not exceeding the bounds of their warrant and documenting whether they are. Importantly, when they give you the warrant, do not say you consent to the search. Say that you accept the warrant and will comply with it. I'll accept the warrant and I will comply. Do not use the words consent because, as I said earlier, they could seize upon that to say uh, that you waived any objections you have to the warrant. And there could be many. After the warrant's served and evidence is gathered, if there's some kind of case that's brought up, you could go to court and look into, well, how is this warrant issued? Did they really have probable cause? If they didn't have probable cause, you could have the evidence excluded under the exclusionary rule. So it's important not to indicate any kind of willingness to let them do anything other than execute their warrant consistent with its terms. And ideally, none of this will ever happen to any of you. But I hope after hearing all of this, you're comforted, you're confident that you could deal with it if it should come to pass. Now, if there were a raid and some of your employees were detained, we like to remind people your obligations to them don't end. So, for the sake of argument, if some of your employees turned out to be undocumented, that doesn't mean they don't have to be paid for all the work that they did. Undocumented workers are entitled to get paid and they have a legal right to enforce it, even if it turns out they were undocumented or they were detained later. Workers' compensation, God forbid somebody should be injured in one of these raids or need some kind of medical care or mental health care. If anyone is hurt, you should file a report of injury to deal with that. Your employees, if they lose their jobs, as a result of being detained, they might have rights to continue their health insurance. Those rights don't go away. And in addition, again, back to the union, if you have a union, they may want to negotiate, if they haven't already, about what will happen to workers that are detained. They could be wrongly detained. They could be people that you can't reemploy because convincing evidence was presented that they're undocumented. So what will happen with them? What would happen if they were to get documentation later? Could they get their jobs back? Things like that. So if you have a union, don't forget to include them in the whole process. A longer term issue is if this all comes to pass, and there's a dramatic drop in the labor supply in this country, and particularly the labor that does the work in our hospitality and restaurant industries, you're going to need new workers. And something that we've brought up, I mean, this is something, we have a 4-year time frame here. This could go on for 4 years. That you could have to replace those workers who are in short supply. And there could be many, many people, it breaks my heart to say this, many young people who are citizens of the United States whose parents are undocumented. And if this comes to pass, we're going to have a whole class of young people who are going to stay here if they, they're depending on how rough the country is that they would be deported back to, are going to stay here. They're going to need jobs, and you're going to need workers. And in certain types of restaurant work, particularly like fast food, it's not that uncommon to employ teenagers or relatively young people. And others, it's less common. And if you see this going on and the promised effort is actually coming to pass, you might want to sort of dip your toe in the young person labor market and experiment with seeing if you can train and use workers who are relatively young, who are 16 or 17 or 18, who you might not otherwise have looked to work in your restaurant. And it's sort of shameful that it could come to that, but it's certainly a possibility that you cannot ignore. So lastly, I'd just like to point out that there's a bigger picture here uh, that you and the association can play an important role in protecting not just yourselves, but other business owners and other Americans. Uh, every time one of you stands up for your rights and makes sure that they are respected, that they can't come storming in without a warrant that's guaranteed, a right that's guaranteed by the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, that's just as important as any other right. You are not just standing up for your own dignity and rights, but those of your fellow association members, your fellow business people, your fellow Americans. And so I hope if this should come to pass, that you will use this advice and do this. And if you all do this, uh, you'll be doing a great service to protect everyone's rights. So that's our presentation, and happy to answer any questions that I can, and any questions that I can't answer, I'm happy to follow up with you afterward.
All right. So if you have questions for Paul, you can pop them into the Q&A box. There are some questions, Paul. And just a reminder that this is for educational purposes, and Paul is not, this is not, individualized legal advice. So educational purposes here. And that was very, very helpful and informative, Paul. We really, really appreciate you sharing that information with us. Okay, so a couple questions about I-9 compliance. So let's see, this person is saying, we recently updated our process for I-9s to e-verify. All of our new hires go through that process, but I'm concerned about our employees who filled out the I-9 10 to 15 years ago. Can I have our older employees fill out the new I-9 forms to go with our new system?
Yes, the answer is yes, that you can, whatever e-verify requires you to put into the system, if there's some data that was not provided earlier, then you can ask them to do that. So in the case we do not allow them, and due
Yeah,
to
I
them
was just,
not having a warrant, they state we're harboring a fugitive. How can that impact an owner, manager, etc.? So, harboring a fugitive requires that you knowingly secret, hide someone from authorities and prevent their apprehension. So the mere fact that you're employing someone at a restaurant is not harboring a fugitive. And if they have a warrant for that person's arrest, they're free to come back with it and look for them in your restaurant. But telling people that they can't come into your private areas without a warrant is not harboring. And that's it. But it's an example of the bluster you may encounter uh, if ICE shows up and they don't have a warrant. If there's a fugitive in your restaurant, they should have a warrant for the person's arrest and a warrant to go in and get them.
and so Paul, can they lie? Can they lie?
Yes,
Yeah, they can lie, right? So it's extra important that you know what your rights are as the
that's
business.
right.
Okay. If during an internal I-9 audit, we identified some expired documents of US citizens, these documents were valid at the time of completion of I-9. Are we required to ask the US citizen employees to provide new documentation?
No.
Okay, easy one. What are the repercussions for a business whose I-9, what are our liabilities if we are found to have undocumented employees without the proper I-9? What are the repercussions for the
So,
business?
so not having proper I-9s, I mean, you could face a fine. That's what you could face. If you have undocumented workers, you could be fined $375 each. If you persistently, intentionally uh, employ undocumented workers, the fines and civil penalties could increase. And you can get up to 6 months in prison for knowingly and persistently employing undocumented workers. And I mean, now enforcement of that may be increased, but uh, it's pretty uncommon for a business owner to go to prison for employing undocumented workers.
Okay. If any part of the warrant that whether it's a judicial warrant, I guess, or an administrative warrant, you just don't know, if any part of the warrant, the information on there is incorrect, or is the business owner allowed to turn them away? So if they don't have the correct business name, if they
Well,
don't
when
have
you
the
say
correct
turn
address.
them away, but let's be specific, is that you would tell them, this warrant is incorrect. This isn't my place of business. You have no right to be in here. I don't consent to it, but you're not going to physically obstruct them from going in. I mean, they're going to go in, but you're going to tell them, I object to this. You don't have the right place, or this isn't the right time. And then, lawyers will sort it out later if it comes to it.
What if they have a warrant naming a former employee? Do we need to allow them access if they have a
If they
proper?
have it, I mean, again, if it's an administrative warrant that just says we want to arrest this person, you don't have to let them in. And well, they have no right to go in. And uh, if you want to, you can just tell them they don't work here anymore. But you don't necessarily want to do that, because if they're looking for them because they're undocumented, then they may, it's sort of an admission that you employed the person. So you don't have to tell them anything.
Okay. So this person is asking what happens if they don't have the warrant. We follow the process of not like all the things that you said to do, and they still come in. So we
Okay.
did go over that, Paul.
Yeah.
If you want to just reiterate what happens in that very
Yeah. So yeah,
situation.
if they were to do that, you would make your objections clear, and then you would you'd tell them that you're trespassing, that I'm calling my lawyer and I'm calling the police to get you out of here. But you would not physically try to remove them or obstruct them. And then you could file a lawsuit against the agents and their boss for violating your Fourth Amendment rights, and get an injunction against them coming back and doing the same thing. And if they violated that injunction, that's a crime.
But a reminder to just never
Just
physically try.
never physically obstruct them.
Should I-9s be kept separately from employee files? And do we need to keep copies of the IDs that we used to verify with the I-9s?
It's a good idea to keep like a copy separate, so you have one set. You do not have to keep copies of the ID, and we don't recommend it.
So I guess this is more of just a question about humanity here. Are ICE raids also taking place at people's homes, or mainly at their places of employment? Should we also be concerned that employees may be detained elsewhere outside of work and in essence just disappear?
So the answer is yes, they are performing raids at people's homes, and probably more commonly than they are at businesses, at least thus far. And yeah, it's certainly possible. And ideally, someone would let you know that someone was detained or arrested, uh, so that they don't just disappear, and that their coworkers don't think they just disappeared.
Any other questions? You can pop them into the Q&A box now. Paul, we didn't talk about this before, but would you be okay, can we circulate this PowerPoint?
Sure, I'll get it to you after we finish.
That's great. Thank you. Any other questions for Paul before we wrap up for today? As a reminder, as a NISR member, you do have access to this recorded webinar. And you can get that by logging into our NISR website, nisr.org. If you have questions about your login credentials or where to find that link, you can email info@nisra.org. Let's see. Our employee files are stored electronically. Do we have to have hard copies of the I-9s?
No,
Okay. Our ICE agents, and I don't know if this is just rumor,
the
but
answer to that, are they paying tippers? I had not heard that.
okay. So the question was, are ICE agents paying people to give them tips about where undocumented people would be? Okay. Yep, we talked about, again, you can go back and view the recording. We hit on what to do if they don't have a proper warrant a couple of times. And the recording will be available a little bit later today on the NISR website. Paul, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Let's see, I'm sorry, there's coming in a couple of questions coming in here. Yeah, do you need to keep copies of I-9s?
You can store them electronically.
Right, okay, great. Okay, everyone, stay safe. Well, let me end with this one. I'm so sorry. How should we handle a situation where an employee who is undocumented is asking whether we will be requiring additional paperwork due to ICE raids?
I mean, you should tell them that you're going to comply with any I-9 requirements. I mean, it's the gist of it. And so
All
are
right.
other employers. So
Um, okay. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it. Paul, thank you so much.
thank
And
you.
good luck out there, everyone. Stay safe, and we will see you next time.